everyone to GeoHug. So I'm very excited for today's session. We've lined up an absolutely amazing panel for you today. But before we do get stuck in today's session, I just would like to take this time to acknowledge the traditional lands which we're all coming from today. I live on the beautiful lands of the Gadigal, of the people of the Aurora Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past, present, and future. And yes, I'm very, very happy with our panel today. It's going to be a lot of fun. So we're joined by Jody Conrad, the founder of Krux Analytics, Daniel Misiano, the president of MBI Global, Patricia Frisch, the head of MRM Data Management at Barrick, and Nick Rossides, the general manager of Swick Mining. So I absolutely love the selection that we've put together, all the way from drill rig manufacturing through to drilling technology and the end user. So with their variety of perspectives, we're going to be hearing from the best on the latest trends and technologies to improve efficiency and streamline operations. So thank you all so much for joining us today. It's amazing having you here.
Thanks for having us.
But yes, I was curious to get it started. What got you all into mining to begin with? And Patricia, what got you into geology? So let's start with you, Patricia. What made you want to become a geologist?
For me, I grew up in a family of geologists, and I went underground for the first time when I was in 5th grade at an underground mine. I grew up in Europe, and we went to visit a salt mine, and I just was hooked from day one. So I got a rock hammer for my 11th birthday, and I've just never looked back.
I love that. And what about you, Daniel? What made you get into the mining industry?
Actually, I was born and raised in a mining community called Val d'Or, which in English means Valley of Gold. Kind of coming in, as a second generation from my Italian father. My father worked in the mines all of his life, and I guess when I was a student, he introduced me to mines both on surface and underground. And I guess, as they say, once you drink the water of the mines, you don't go back. So I guess that speaks for the rest of my history.
I love that. And what about you, Jody?
So I come in from a different angle. I'm from Saskatchewan, where there actually was, well, there's a lot of mining now. And when I grew up, it was there, but it wasn't as active as it is today. But I took my mechanical engineering and ended up getting into the oil and gas industry. So more soft rock drilling based in Alberta. And that's where I got a lot of my experience. And then actually during my MBA that I took out in Kingston, Ontario, I met a diamond driller. He owned a small company of about 30 rigs, and him and I were chatting one day at the bar, which usually happens over whiskey. And I told him about what we do in oil and gas, and he's like, "We need you over here. Let's go." And that's where it started.
I love that. That's so good. And yeah, what about you, Nick?
Well, growing up in Kalgoorlie, I think it was inevitable I was going to go into mining or the industry in general. So, look, my first step in was drilling, surface drilling, and that's what got me hooked. And yeah, just grew my passion from there, and grew within the industry. So here we are now, and the underground environment, and loving it.
I love that. Oh, it's so great having you all here. Thank you so much. Before we do get stuck in, I always ask speakers to bring some pet rocks, and I believe Nick has a surprise one for us. Can you tell us what you have?
Yes, I've got a very special one here. Can we see this?
Come a bit closer.
It is a river stone.
Oh.
Okay, so my son gave me this rock 8 years ago for Father's Day. So very, very special. And he's painted it. It's he's written AFL on it, so he's got a footy on there, etc. So that's my special right. It has a special place on my shelf in the office, and yeah.
I love that. That is like the most wholesome story I've had on GeoHug ever.
Family values, right?
I love that. Thank you. And what about you, Patricia?
Keeping in the theme, my daughter gave me this. It's a piece
No
of
way,
silver.
both of you.
The first mine I ever went into was an underground mine, and they shaved the salt flakes under our hands and made us taste them. And the sylvite is what they make those pink lights from, and it's really better. And so I just think it's really fun.
That is super cool. Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone. So we'll start getting into it now. But yeah, my first question for all of you would be, how is data at the rig currently captured across the industry?
In the mining industry, from what we found as we came into the industry, is a lot of it's on paper, Excel-based information coming off the rigs at this time. You know, there's been a big push to going digital, and I mean, Krux has been a big part of that in pushing that. But you know, I think there's still quite a bit of movement in there, and you know, a lot about what we'll talk about today is talking about, you know, that next step as well.
Yeah. And what about you, Nick?
Yeah, so look, from our journey, being part of Swick, we obviously started with paper plods, as Jody just mentioned, which, you know, is the starting point there. But we grew as a business and needed more data. From paper plods, you're relying on a lot of Excel and manual entry into that. We actually created our own digital plod system in-house, but you know, you need the resources to run that. So eventually we went to a third party through Reflex, and we started using their DDR. But the beauty of that is it can speak to, you know, our client systems, our own internal systems. We use Power BI, and so that just feeds into that, and obviously from there you can draw whatever you want to do in terms of tracking and monitoring from, you know, your rig and efficiencies that you want to gain, and then obviously invoicing for our clients. But it goes further than just the drill. You know, it's electronic equipment pre-starts that are now being used there as well, which is great, and also from a safety standpoint through lead indicators, etc., that we're using. So task observations, audits, inspections. So it's really endless in what we can be doing in that space.
Yeah. And how's it being done with you, Patricia?
We have a lot of drillers that are using paper and then transferring to Krux. So just in January, we went global, and so we're implementing Krux at all of our sites. But even some of the sites that are using it are still transferring from paper into the system, and we've seen a huge benefit from having validated data entry at the rig. So that's why we're moving all digital now.
Yeah, yeah. And so with moving digital, what do you all think are the possibilities in the future for data capture?
I think the possibilities are really endless. I mean, we've already seen some of the work that the Krux team have done with putting the Krux stacks together to collect live feed data off of a rig, and we're fleshing out with some custom things that we're trying to do to integrate into our geologic databases. So we're really excited with the digitization of the future.
Yeah, I think Patty and I did a project actually just with digital data, and regardless of where you have your data, if you can bring your data in normalized or in a way that you can correlate everything to depth, there's a way that you can layer that into your models. And actually, even just with data that a driller is entering in to any digital system, if you do that, even if they're saying, you know, I drilled so many meters over this period of time, we actually correlated and put it over top of some of Patty's models, and you can actually see the value of the data, even just from what the driller's interpreting and telling you. You can actually see rock hardness changes. You can see where fault zones are. Not accurate enough, though, to actually make a decision on it, but you can see there's a correlation. And so that next evolution is taking out the interpretation, actually getting more granular data, and then what would the power of that data be? And that's the question we like to put out there now, because that would be the next evolution, how I see it anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
If I may, from a manufacturing point of sight, obviously, maybe just complimenting Patricia, obviously now with the advent of technology, again, it's limitless. I mean, for us, you know, going from, if you go back in history, going from a mechanical drill to a hydraulic drill, I mean, now we can offer a totally autonomous drill, which is actually run from electrical over hydraulic. So for us, obviously, you know, the first goal is to obviously offer our customers, you know, the best possible quality of core, which of course comes all the way to the geologist. But you know, more importantly, it's all the aspects of drilling. And now the good thing is that with the computerized drilling, now the goal is to how can you have new partnerships with add-ons with regards to getting even more data, if not complementing the data that's already available through the different technologies. So again, we see a tremendous advantage going forward.
Yeah. And what do you find other industries are doing, like such as oil and gas?
Yeah, I can speak to the oil and gas side. So drilling rigs and oil and gas are, larger capital investments. When you talk about equipment, you're talking about in the mining space, let's just say around the $5 million mark for the average piece of equipment. You go into mining and you're talking $15 to $20 million. So the technology of getting data off these rigs has been there for a long time, but it's never been economically feasible in the mining space. I think now with the Internet of Things, technology evolving, costs have been coming down. You're seeing this technology more and more finding its way into the mineral space. And I think there's huge opportunity, as Daniel mentioned, getting into the autonomous drills, but not even going autonomous. There's drills out there right now that already have some of this instrumentation sitting on them, but no one knows how to harvest that data. And so that's also an opportunity, I think, for the industry. I think there's been a lot of time where everyone thinks more data is better, but honestly, if you don't know how to harvest it, it's not providing you the value yet. And so I think there is a step to that.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Jody. And if I may also, obviously, like you were saying, there is obviously a lot of data available. And I think at least what we've noticed as a manufacturer is that as you grow the audience within the mining operations, I think, we're getting a lot of interest, whereas, traditionally, of course, when we talk about mineral exploration, of course, the first end user, of course, is the geologist, right? But now, we get the chance to talk, with mining engineers, mine planning, rock mechanics, et cetera, et cetera. So again, we can see a lot of advantages as to what the information gathered can offer. It's just a matter, I guess, now of how do you streamline the right information to the right either individual or team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think we proxy a lot of information too that we could also get directly off the rig. Like we proxy hardness by a variety of different methods in the field, and to have actual data would be more helpful. Like our drill and blast engineers use hardness, slopes engineers, people far smarter than I do use that kind of information, and we just have some primitive tools to kind of give them our best guess, but nothing that's really normalized. So it'd be helpful.
Yeah. So what do you think the advantages of capturing data at the rig are? Like for the drillers, for the miners? Nick, did you want to start that off?
Yeah, I think going forward, training and consistency is a big one. I think especially with what data can be pulled from the rig, it's not just what the drilling's doing, but I suppose reading the outputs from the rig. And off the back of COVID, there was a pretty big exodus from experience, within the industry, and then also attracting a lot of inexperienced people back in. We've seen a lot of people being promoted early, I suppose, within the industry. Some roles that may traditionally take 18 to 24 months are now taking 9 months, to be operating a piece of equipment. So I think the data that comes back can be used in in that training space. Here's the optimum position for where this rig should be drilling at, to this ground type, to this particular client, to this particular site, whatever the case may be. And it just helps fast track that experience into those positions. So I think that's probably one of the bigger benefits that I see as a service provider to our clients, that we could benefit from that.
Yeah. What do you think of that, Patty?
Yeah, so as a geologist or as a miner, I try not to focus on what are the drillers doing, but what can we always do better. And so one of the things that we got tremendous insight and benefit from is particularly like downtime. So we would be waiting on water trucks, waiting on fuel, waiting on pad prep, waiting on blast, waiting on things that were within our control. And so we were able to kind of schedule with short-term planning in our active sites a little bit better, and prepare the pads faster, and just have things ready better.
Mhm.
But the thing that surprised me probably the most is when we implemented, what was that, in 2020, Jody? We implemented Krux, and we had a month's worth of data for 4 drill companies. So I don't know, maybe 20 rigs, 24 by the end, that we were entering, and we were seeing that there were validation issues. Some had costs that were in our favor, some were in favor of the driller, but the accuracy of data and the accuracy of billing and that handshake on the contract to make the billing just a simple end of month moment in time instead of weeks and weeks of going back and forth was a huge benefit. And then we could focus on all the things that were within our control, and make sure that we had supplies or whatever we needed to have, and then let the drillers figure out what they were going to harvest from that. That was super important to us, and that was something that I wasn't really expecting. I was expecting to get data and kind of figure out why we were drilling so slow and things were so expensive. I didn't really realize that there would be a cost benefit in terms of accuracy, and then that we'd have such a long, really nice, clear list of things that we as the mining company could do to support the drilling to progress.
Yeah, right.
I think sorry.
No, go.
I was gonna say some of the other auxiliary benefits too, when you look forward to the future. I mean, we all hear ESG used quite broadly, but a part of this too is what is the drilling energy that we're utilizing, and what is that carbon footprint when we're drilling as well. And so, when you talk about some of this instrumentation data, optimizing the driller. So one, you're spending less time drilling because you have a more standardized drilling process and training and people on site. But two, you're also optimizing that equipment's performance. And so you're probably burning less fuel. The energy required to do the hole could be a little bit less. And so some of this some of the technology of getting this data from the machine can help us report in some of those ways as well. And so I see a huge future. Not only, obviously you can help optimize your operations, you can optimize your people. You could look at getting more insight of what's in the ground before the core, comes out. But I also think there's even more about that ESG carbon footprint and making sure we're being, as optimized as we can, as organizations.
Yeah.
Jody, if I may compliment, obviously from a drill rig manufacturer, what we're seeing, most of our experiences now with regards to computer-based, the technology, autonomy of drills, and most of it for us has been underground. And like you say, Jody, and also Nick, when you look at costs, I mean, obviously when you buy this type of equipment, you are going to pay a bit more, but then you also have what you call your cost of ownership that comes into play. And then when you add all of the other new technologies that are quickly coming into play, then how do you implement this? Where again, it optimizes for us. Really, what we've seen is, again, our goal is to offer the customer, in this case, me being a drilling company, the best possible quality of core that can be offered to the mining house, which of course is a key element, right, for a geologist. But then, like I said, there's so many other advantages that we see going forward with the use of technology. And again, the training, again, like Nick was saying, the training and bringing in new recruits, again, be it, as the industry knows, traditionally drillers have been men for decades, if not centuries. Now we're seeing more and more women quickly adapting to this new technology. And actually we welcome, with the lack of labor we have all across the world, it's a grand benefit to the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have to agree with that, Danielle, especially in the underground space. I mean, the automation is, is behind where we see, surface operations, and that would be a fantastic opportunity to open up that door to see more females in mining, for that, especially in the drilling industry.
And it's also, I must admit, Nick, if I may, what we've seen so far, at least in Canada, if I may, is that by bringing this new segment of labor force, it's actually a nice competition, because as you know, drillers around the world, for the most case, at least from what I've seen, work with a base salary and with a bonus. And what we've seen with the automation of drills, when used correctly, we've actually seen a more consistent flow of revenue coming in, with regards to the labor force, and also it becomes attractive, for all the right reasons. So, and of course, safer for all the right reasons. And if I can also put another very important aspect is, call it the physical work when using the new technologies, it brings in so many more, much more advantages.
Yeah. Just to like backtrack a bit, what data is being collected at the rig at the moment?
Well, from a manufacturer's point of view, obviously, we're talking about drilling parameters, which of course is a key element. Which in many cases now, I guess one of the big, change management is when the benefits are actually seen, observed, and actually accepted, is how you go from a traditional pilotly controlled equipment, and actually now you let the machine run. Now, obviously, of course, one aspect that will always be the challenge is the geology of the rock, right? So, but once you get a certain, call it consistency, which a drill can bring, and if the driller is willing to let the machine do what it can do, then you get the full benefits.
I think it depends, Jessica, on the site. So, if the driller is still collecting information on paper, they might have, so let's go 2 steps. You have paper and then you have a hydraulic, let's just call it a hydraulic rig. It's just got the valves on it and some gauges. No data is being recorded of the drill itself. And then the data that's being recorded is all written down by the driller on a piece of paper to articulate what they've done that day. And that has a few purposes. One, you want to understand how many meters they drilled that day. Obviously, the geo wants to know that. They want to know if a survey, was completed and should I have the survey data. But they also want to know, were we on standby, et cetera, because those are components that lead to the billing process. So if you go to someone who's digital right now, which is I think where a lot of people right now are in that shift from paper to digital, or already in a digital format. And so digital doesn't always mean, it's standardized, because digital can still be like Excel spreadsheets. And Excel is not a database. I know geos love that saying, and it's true. Excel is not a database. Excel will fail you. It will, but it's a great tool and we all use it. But getting that data in is still just the daily shift report information that's still being interpreted. It's just being digitized. So another layer is standardization, and that's making sure your data all comes in the same method and validated so that you can actually compare apples to apples across different organizations. And a lot of people are starting to make that shift. You'll see a lot of companies come up with standard databases or global terminology. But there's a lot of rigs out there, like we've been talking about. So, Daniel talks about the fully autonomous rigs, and like that stuff is starting to come in the market. But there's a whole group of rigs out there that have been manufactured for the last 10, 15 years that have rate of penetration. They know the RPM that it's spinning at. They know how much pressure they're putting in the hole. They know how much water they're pushing down there. There's a lot of that data that is giving feedback to the driller so that he can make decisions on how he's driving his drill, but nobody's harvesting that data for any other purpose at this time. And I think there's a huge opportunity there in the market to start looking at how we can do that better.
Yeah.
And Jody, you're absolutely right. I mean, when you talk about drilling per se, if you're looking, purely from a market intelligence point of view, globally, we're talking about plus or minus 10,000 drill rigs around the world, of which, of course, the vast majority now are hydraulically driven, whereas computer-based drill rigs represent less than 5%. So you're absolutely right, Jody, in your assessment.
Yeah, we're getting a lot further from just collecting hours that have been operated at the rig versus, standby or work rate and how many meters have been drilled. It's now starting to look at, like we mentioned before, the output of the rig and how we use that. I mean, we can still calculate our pen rates, but you don't want that to be a manual calculation. What are we doing with the flows and the pressures of feed and, and basically getting that tool or a procedure of this is how we should be drilling this area, this ground. It's the best offering back to our clients and what we're doing, but it's also at the end of the day, it's about the product. It's the clean, safe core, and that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. Is there more data? Like, is it more focusing on streamlining things and improving the efficiencies, or is there more data that you think we should or could be capturing at the rig that we're not?
It's a very interesting question. Listen, there's already, I think we're just at the cusp, obviously, with autonomous drills and computer based drills where the data, computerized drills, if I may, they've been existing for probably at least a good 20 years. And we're probably now, I would say, at the version 6, 7, or 8. But now that we actually take the importance of what the data can actually be driven from the drill, I think now we're just starting. So what is the outcome for the future? Again, I'll use Patricia's quote, which is endless. I think the key now will be, the language. What language will become a language of use that will be accepted, if I can put it globally. I know that Jody's working, has a tremendous product, and we actually had a chance to collaborate on some of the projects. But the data, I think again, it's how do you streamline it, how do you segment it, and who does it go to?
I think with data capture, it's not just important what you're capturing, but what kind of question are you trying to answer? What are you trying to ask? And so then you have to kind of think about, if the data has a certain trend, what does that mean? And so I think the real value comes in having normalized data. And so I'm obviously not looking at what are the drill parameters, but what are the overall daily activities that I can, as a geologist with rigs, help optimize. And so with normalized data, when we had 4 companies drilling on one project, it was actually pretty cool, because we could say, this company has a lot of standby and this company has a lot of this, and then start figuring out why, and make adjustments on our team, just by trying to figure out what are the data actually telling us. And I think we get so inundated with just looking at graphs and thinking, oh, well, this looks normal, and not thinking about what is it trying to tell me and how can I improve it. And what part do I own and what part do other teams own? I think it comes down to interpreting and having data that's normalized, not having just unnormalized data that doesn't go to depth, doesn't have time on it, doesn't have. We did a lot of work to eliminate the category other. We had a lot of other activities, other costs, other whatever, and we did a lot to eliminate that, so that we had those categories kind of binned appropriately. But it's really the interpretation. I think that's the hardest part, is asking the questions.
Yeah, I agree 100% there, Patricia. It's the interpretation is the biggest thing, and the efficiencies and inefficiencies need to be identified, and how we improve. It's not just from the client's perspective, obviously, and then obviously the service providers want to look at that. But I think that just marries right in the middle of creating that that efficiency on both sides.
Yeah. And I know Patty talked about normalized data. One thing that we take from that, and I'll just use an example in oil and gas. In oil and gas, there is actually a industry standard. It's called a CAODC tower sheet. I can spell it for you all later, but it's actually an industry standard form that every driller in the world has to fill out. And they have to report on basic categories, and it's a language that the industry is agreed upon. And what that means is, it doesn't matter who is drilling for you, the data you get can be consumed and compared, because it's coming in its own manner. You can still, I can call it drilling, and it can be drilling with some other subtypes. You don't need to go down to all the granular levels, but you need to have the big buckets that everyone agrees on, so that you can do that analysis. And so that's something that we built at Krux, and I took that from that experience, is to build a model that allows you it allows the flexibility to report at more granular levels, but also allows you to roll it up and report on that on a corporate basis. And so it really is about making sure what data comes in a normalized fashion, so you're not interpreting that again. And that's so that you can do analytics. I mean, you can't compare things if they're not being reported in the same fashion.
Yeah, so all of your meters and time and activities, that they're all being called something that's binning to the same thing.
Yeah. So what sort of technology is currently available on the market for those that want to start going down this path?
Well, if I may, from a manufacturer's point of view, I mean, obviously, we're all, there's some very good manufacturers out there. What I would say, at least for us, is that we've actually tried to capture existing technologies, especially when I mentioned earlier, when we go from electrics over hydraulics. So out of respect to our customers, what we're trying to do is we're trying to give them a product that is hopefully easily maintainable, but also that can be serviced within proximity. So we obviously use, a very good hydraulically driven partners, again, electric partners that already are OEMs, which just adds on to our technology. And again, it's out of respect to the customers, because I'm sure Nick would agree that, especially for a drilling contractor, when you start mixing and matching procurement, if you have a different fleet from, from surface to underground or vice versa, that can become a very hectic, call it challenge, with regards to inventory management, for example. So for us, really, it's collaborations. It's partnering with very good OEMs along with our recipe of our own intellectual property.
Yeah,
I think when
totally.
it comes to
Sorry, Jody. I was just going to say I agree with that. With us being an OEM as well, Daniel, it is about that partnership and having that offering, and it's all about that detail that needs to come from that. So, look, we are very big in that space also, but yeah, it is a journey, and it's one that you want to take with your clients, I suppose, as well, and also your suppliers.
For collecting data at the rig, there's quite a few, there's more than just Krux out there. There's more solutions, but there are solutions out there for digital. I know a lot of companies have their own in-house systems that they've built. There's many different ways to get that data. The biggest thing for me is making sure that you normalize it so that you can do that analysis. I think that's the biggest thing to look into. But there are companies out there that can provide that service today. As well as there's in-house systems that do it as well. I think the next step, though, that next generation of getting the data off the drill, I think there needs a lot more partnerships. And just to kind of add to what Nick and Daniel said, the technology is there on some rigs. I still think it's a subset of the market. I think it's maybe 25% of the market, maybe max, that has some data available that we could start using, right? And so that the market and the equipment has to evolve, and someone has to drive that change. So who's going to drive the change? It's typically going to be the mining client, because they're the ones who are going to request for those changes to pull through, to see that equipment and that standard come up so that you can start gathering that data. But with that comes so much change, because you go from hydraulic rigs where I've got everything in the C can in the back and my driller can fix it, to now I've got an electric over hydraulic, and somehow I lost my power connection. Now I need an electrician out there. And then you go to the autonomous, and all of a sudden I'm on standby because the rig doesn't work. And I'm pointing these out as the issues. They're all solvable through the partnerships, through all that stuff. But I think that's also what blocks the technology from getting to the market as well, because people are fearful of that. And I think you have to start making steps to that change, because it is inevitable. And as you work that out, or be the first to work that out, you're going to see those benefits as well. Because I think people are working on that together.
Pretty good point, Jody. If I may, maybe just to compliment Jody, for example, we have the pleasure of working with Nick and the Swick team. Again, Swick being their own OEM, just as we are. We actually have been collaborating now for several years, whereas we actually exchange or collaborate on different components of the drill. And again, out of respect to Swick, the recipe seems to work, if I'm not mistaken, Nick. But I mean, that's another great example of collaboration, which is you don't necessarily just have to work with one. Now, mind you, of course, I'll preach for my company, don't get me wrong, but now I think collaborations and partnerships is the way of going future. The lone wolf, I don't think, is the future anymore.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of the data is already there. I mean, Jody, you touched on that before as well. It's already there. It's how we capture it. It's the interpretation of it, and how we're using it. And I think it can be a great benefit to the industry as a whole. We just need to step forward and grab it with two hands, make that happen. Like you said, a lot of it is sort of held back now because of fear or looking at it as a competitive advantage. But as an industry, I suppose we need to look at that and how we step forward.
Yeah. We have someone tuning in coming in from the geologist perspective. So they're saying that they're concerned about drilling efficiencies because it's always expensive and individual rig performance. So as a driller, working as efficiently as possible, given the current ground conditions, comparing the performance of one contractor against another on the same project's relatively easy. Why do they need real-time data metrics to judge things like that? What else is, I guess some of the real value in, electronic, real-time data capture?
Well, I suppose from my point of view as a service provider, I mean, we use it for our own internal purposes as well. I mean, it's not just to win work, but it's to be innovative and how you can improve, your machines, your equipment. It comes down to the training of your people. It's a lot bigger than just collecting the data, but it's looking at, well, efficiencies in terms of drill bit selections and how much water flow are we using, the size of feed cylinders, etc. Not every rig is the same, and Swick first introduced the mobile rig to the industry, and that used to be our point of difference, and now you look at it, just about every contractor in Australia, more so in Australia, has now got a mobile rig. So you got to find other things that set you apart, that make you more efficient, make you more productive, make you more safer, which is more valuable at the end of the day to your client.
Yeah.
And I would dare say it's the same thing, Nick, for us from a manufacturing point of view, again, servicing the industry in terms of the drilling servicing companies. Again, for us is how can we make it easier for the end user, the driller in this case, at least for us, how can we make it easier for them to operate? And at the same time, also, the technology, again, for us is what we're seeing is obviously it's a change management on some of the, we've seen tremendous strides, especially with new, again, no disrespect to experienced drillers. I mean, they are now the coaches, at least we see them as mentors, but we're also seeing that the new recruits coming into play are learning a lot quicker. And at the same time, also their feedback is just as important as an experienced driller, per se. So I think, for all these right reasons, we have to have the ability to listen and also be able to adapt, which I think now, we have access to so many, for example, having the chance to talk today, you go back 20 years, it wasn't even possible to have such a video conference, for all the right reasons. So.
Mm-hmm. And I think another layer there too is that the data isn't meant to only just compare drillers and necessarily optimize your program. It's even about rock hardness. Even if they're drilling in the same area and you can compare them, and this one's more productive than this one, as they're going through that rock hardness, or how much water they're using, or what mud they're using, or what bits they're using, or we can go down even to more granular levels rather than just driller versus driller, rig versus rig. That's not what the intention of that data is from my point of view. It's more about the value that data could provide. And so maybe on the rock hardness or mud selection or rig selection, maybe it's a more powerful rig is meant to cut through that rock better. There's other ways to look at that to help optimize your operation. It's not necessarily driller versus driller. And I think people get hung up on that.
Very good point, Jody.
Yeah. How do you feel about it, Patty?
Well, when we had 24 rigs turning at one of our projects, it was really helpful to have a lot of data comparatively between rigs, between companies, and we could really pull out just different things, like this driller is very slow but never doesn't complete the depth, so we'll put them out in an area where we have some really deep holes, and these guys really slam through, and maybe we don't need all the recovery, so we'll put them on our grade control program. And we just were able to kind of move the rigs around as we needed to with the companies, and then kind of play some fun games, like incentivize for a hole completion, and set KPIs that were realistic to the things that we had seen, and really incentivize with dollars to achieve what we thought could sometimes be achieved but wasn't consistently being achieved. So we had a lot of data. It was really fun. When we were able to compare, we were really able to say, why are different companies taking longer for the same standby? If I have a weather delay, Why does one company take 4 hours to come back and the next company takes 10 hours? And really dig into how to solve those problems. Well, one company had maybe a blade and the other one didn't and was waiting on operations to clear the path. It just helps you solve problems when you have data that's normalized across companies, across rigs.
Yeah. So what sort of challenges are you having or seeing in the market? We'll start with you, Patty, I guess. Yeah, with capturing data, analyzing the data, trying to change your teams and look at things work differently. What sort of challenges are you finding from your perspective?
We did a pretty extensive review of a couple different systems, and one of the things that we really ended up loving with Krux is the idea that there were validations and the data were normalized. So there's a solid data model, and you can convert whatever you need to between projects. You can roll it all up into a single dashboard for a global overview. But then we could see things like gaps and overlaps in our data with big flags, and you just don't see that when you're looking at an Excel spreadsheet or an in-house Microsoft Access database. You really have to query out those things pretty rigorously, and so that data just popped for us, and that's what made it kind of an easy choice in the end.
Yeah. Jody, from the technology perspective, what sort of challenges are you seeing?
From our side, I think the biggest challenge we have is getting people to go digital. I think that's the biggest step if they're not digital already, and getting comfortable with the technology and the reporting. And I think there's a lot of, as I talked about certain things, and even here talking about driller versus driller, I think a lot of people are afraid of transparency and industry collaboration, but I think they're actually the two things that are going to help see this industry succeed and go through these things. And so I think for us, the biggest thing is that change management, to go to digital, to make that move, and to start understand that this data and working together collaboratively with your clients and drillers actually provides value to both parties. And once people get there, that's where these next opportunities and how this will continue to evolve. And that's the part I'm really excited about, but I definitely see resistance to that change management.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll circle back. Yeah, sorry, I'll circle back to this, but talking about the change management and more collaboration, how do you think that we start driving this? Like, who drives it? How do we start, progressing and bringing on more change?
I think we've seen that we really have to, as the mining company, kind of ask for what we want. And even then we get some of our contractors putting their data on paper, translating it into the system, finding that they have gaps either in their day or in their data. And then just kind of going back and reiterating, like, this is our expectation of you, that you collect this data in a standard fashion into this normalized system so that you have both clean data and data that is comparable and lines up with the contract, really, instead of just free form data entry. And so we put a huge emphasis on saying, this is the system that we'd like to use, and you can harvest the data from Krux, but we want it going in clean on a shift by shift basis. And some of it's been a struggle, some of it's been quite easy. Some of the smaller companies have been really receptive, and they found it so much of a blessing to just get to the end of the month and hit go. And some other companies have said, we have our own system, this is double entry, I don't want to do it, but they're missing the validation steps, I think, in a lot of cases. So
yeah, it's interesting.
And from a manufacturing point of view, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, if you look at our company, NBI Global, I mean, obviously we're still a relatively newcomer, if I can put it this way, at least in the capital equipment arena. I think for us, one of the biggest, I guess, qualities that I like to think that we bring is, is listening to what exactly is it that is required. In many cases, again, with all due respect, there are very many good manufacturers around the world. I think it's just asking the right questions. And in some cases, even we'll tell the customer, and we've experienced that. We've told a customer, based on their requirements, put us in the worst conditions. and then let's see how it functions out in terms of what you really need. If you're just going to put us in a normalized, again, I'll use the term normal, but if you're going to put us in a situation where, for example, you're already getting, I would say, satisfactory performance from the drill, we say, well, let's take it one step higher. How can we respond to a challenge that you may have today that you'd like to be addressed? And so far, it's been well received and also a good success factor for us.
Yeah. Does it do you find from the manufacturing perspective like it takes a lot of time to be able to bring on change or invent, new
Absolutely.
solutions
Absolutely. I mean, pretty much my career has always been in exploration, especially servicing side, from a sales perspective. But again, the wanting to change right now, for example, if you look at the wireline drilling system, the wireline drilling system has been existing now for over 70 years. The system is still pretty much the same today. Obviously, it's improved in terms of its productivity, in terms of its safety, but we're still looking at drilling a certain dimension of a hole in the same manner. Only now, I think, we have a chance to do it even better, safer, and more productive.
Yeah. And what about the drilling perspective, Nick?
Yeah, look, I'd have to say Swick's probably been using digital plods for at least the last 10 years. And when we first started that, we were the ones introducing that to our customers. I think now it's become, it's the norm now, like Patricia said, where there's a lot of clients now that want to see that validation, they want to see that consistency. And it's about making sure that, the data that we're collecting off the rigs and are going through into the digital plods, for example, is it can be interpreted the same way. And that's what we want. We want to be having that same conversation with the customers about, well, this is what we're seeing. Are they seeing the same thing? So all our contracts are built into the back of the digital plods. So there is no sitting there and arguing about what was this hour for, what does that mean? It's all there. It's spelled out. It's black and white. But I do think probably the biggest challenge is the interpretation of data and making sure that everyone is on the same page and we're looking at the same thing, because what we might think is important, the next customer may not.
Yeah. Someone here's asking, with all the data, are we talking standardized or normalized?
So I think maybe Jody jump in, but normalized is really when you have a clean data model. So you don't have unstructured data. So you can't create your own terms, your own fields, your own anything as you're entering data on a daily basis. You have pick lists that have facts and dimensions associated to them. So like an hour, a day, a shift. And then the standardization is really about calling, drilling, your pre-shifts, your safety meetings, all your activities, your reaming, your standby for blast, your standby for lunch, that they're all just called the same kind of thing. So I think the normalized data allows you to get a clean data set so you can pull queries and you don't have all these fields being created on the fly that maybe aren't appropriate. And then the standardization is when you create a data dictionary that you're trying to work off of so that you can kind of translate activities from company to company.
Yeah. No, that's good.
You marry the two of them and you have amazing Power BI dashboards.
And from a manufacturing point of view, if I may, we probably might use the standardized, call it the way of collecting information. In other words, a drill is a drill. In other words, you have different parameters which will make you have or achieve a successful hole to be achieved. So for us, it's taking that information now and actually, how do you actually optimize from those drilling parameters to do the work? If I may, as an example, if you take a pilotly controlled hydraulic drill, again, a good experienced driller, depending on the drill hole segment that he has to achieve, and hopefully soon she will have to achieve. And normally, you'll work on what you see in front of you, like Jody was saying earlier. If you take a hydraulically drilling machine, you have your pilot controls and you have your different quadrants in front of you that will give you water pressure, your RPM, if you're a deep hole, you'll pull back and so on and so forth. Now it's taking this information and actually what is the point of, I don't know if it's the right term, but how do you actually optimize the information that you receive to continuously let the machine do what it does best? I mean, in some cases, I've seen drillers that, for example, if they're getting 15 centimeters, a minute in a given borehole, of course, in some cases, their goal will be, well, how do I get 16, 17, 18 centimeters a minute? But there is a point where the machine will actually give you a negative result because it's finely controlled. Where using computer data, or at least the computerized machine, once the parameters are set, and again, depending on the geology, you can actually get a much better result, consistent.
I know you're very fond of talking about drilling itself, but we saw
Yes.
at one of our projects that the actual drilling was only about 2 hours out of a 12-hour shift. So for us, a huge benefit too was seeing everything else that was happening, and then trying to not look at what can the drillers do better, but what can we do better. And so we tried to really separate that, and I think it was really successful. We tried to look at the shift as an overall, and the drilling is a huge component of that when it's running. But when it's not running, we really needed to look at ourselves and say, why? What can we do better? And so the KPIs that you can get as a driller, I think, are super important. Maybe not for me, but for you. But all those other pieces, I think, are a collaborative effort on why are we actually not turning rods right now?
What are some of
Patricia,
the
what you're saying,
common
you're
reasons?
absolutely right.
Sorry.
Sorry, Daniel.
Sorry, no, like I said, no, Patricia, you're absolutely. And again, now with all the data that's available, like I say, you're absolutely right. I mean, a drilling program is not just the drilling per se, as you say so correctly. And again, gathering all the information and hopefully finding call it the best possible formula in a given project. I guess that's when you reach your pinnacle, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, I suppose that there is so many different viewpoints because as a manufacturer, that's where you're coming from, Daniel. Obviously, Patricia, as a client, you're looking at those efficiencies, and then, obviously as Swick being a service provider, we're looking at both sides of the fence and how we can add that value. And
Nice.
We definitely went through that period, for when we first started, and is looking at those efficiencies and how can we look at the standby events and have these discussions with our customers. So we have 3 monthly review meetings, but we're using all the data that's collected from the rig to explain to our clients, here's the impact that comes from you as a customer in terms of mine delays, etc. This is the impact from us, from what we've been doing and what we've learned and how we can improve. But it's that collaboration coming back to say, well, what can we do to maybe help reduce some of this delay? Is there anything on our behalf that we can do? Or we've noticed our active work rates have gone up or whatever for increased rig moves, surveys, whatever the case may be. But what's the next step to try to reduce that, to go back to that drill time? Because ultimately that's what it's going to come back to eventually, is that drill time. And for a client, I suppose it's that cost per meter that you want to be looking at as well, and making sure that you're getting value for money.
Yeah. This is as someone who hasn't spent an overly lot amount of time at a drill rig, I was really surprised to learn that comment, Patricia, of of your estimate of say 2 hours of drilling on a 12-hour shift. What are some, from someone very naive with this whole part of the world, what are some of the big reasons that they aren't spinning more often?
One of the things that we found pretty quickly, and we made some big changes, and it cost us actually a lot of union discussions to get this done, is we have a requirement for a hot lunch in one of the countries we're operating. And so it's 45 minutes out to the pit and approximately the same back. So they would go out in the morning, have their safety meeting, pre-shift inspections, start drilling, cut for lunch, drive 45 minutes, take an hour for lunch, drive 45 minutes back, ramp back up, and then leave 45 minutes before shift ends. So you're losing 3, 4, 5 hours per shift just for what we would call commuting hours. And one of the things we were able to do is kind of build a little Meals on Wheels in the pit and deliver a hot lunch and kind of stagger the shifts for lunch a little bit. And that worked quite well, and that saved us maybe 2 hours per shift, and that was pretty big. Some of the other things that we learned pretty quickly is, you know, when you're in an active project, you have different blast radii for where you have to like move your people and equipment. You can leave your equipment, you can stay, but you have to just be on radio silence and take a minute or whatever. So we were able to work with the short-term engineers and figure out where we were going to be blasting and where those radii were, and place our rigs, place the drill rigs outside of those radii so that we'd have less drill and blast standby. There were a lot of things that we could kind of harvest data-wise and improve how we sequence things, and so that was helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I learned a lot then. Someone is taking a guess saying welcome to Argentina.
Possibly.
I mean, I think
I'll never
it's
tell.
a good point though. Is geographically, there's lots of different challenges that maybe if you've only worked in one area of the world, you don't understand some of those other challenges. I mean, like Patty said, 2 hours a day drilling. Well, that's because geographically where that mine is located, the logistics of the mine, the hardness of the rock, you know, that was actually a good achievement sometimes if they got 2 hours in a shift. So, you know, you have to take all those things into consideration as well. Again, that you can't put, you know, one site off another site because they have different logistical challenges as well.
Yeah.
But it is interesting once you see the data to see how that varies across different areas.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in geology for a while, and it's not the first company I've worked for, and I remember you know, hot shifting at the rig. The drillers would just keep the rods turning 24/7. They would eat whatever you would bake them, and they would be grateful for it. You know, and there would be 3 people on a rig, and some of the places we're operating with Barrick, they're just not like that. They don't measure in terms of efficiencies. They measure in terms of number of people employed per ounce of gold or pound of copper, and not how many pounds are being produced at the cheapest cost. It's really a lot more human than that, and they have a whole different value system that has to be taken into account in all of your projects.
Yeah. Yeah, someone said here, if any of you have drilled in Indonesia, you'll know that there are times when the drillers have to hand carry the rig from site to site. So
yeah,
it does change a lot where you are, it sounds like. Yeah.
I think it sure does. I worked for the company that broke the Barrick scandal, and for sure there was a lot of carrying rigs through the jungle by hand.
So talking of, yeah, like this digital transformation and moving into this way, what do you all think is like a timeline for, you know, everyone to sort of be doing things, yeah, digitally and in the same way? And what do you think's next?
I suppose from my perspective, like we've mentioned, a lot of this data has already been captured by rigs, you know, and so a lot of this stuff can be done now. There's systems out there that can capture it. It can be done instantly. It's live data. I think that, like we mentioned before, the biggest restriction is around the interpretation and obviously what we do with it after that. But a lot of it is there now. It just depends. You know, we've just heard, you know, it's depending where we are working around the world and what's on offer and what those challenges are, because it's not as easy as just collecting that data and using it straight away for some of us.
What about you?
I think running a large company makes it easier for us to ask for digital data, and even then we're seeing quite a bit of resistance that we're working through. And then the drilling itself is a lot easier when you're not in an operating mine site. our brownfields and exploration projects have a lot easier time with some of the logistics that they don't have the logistics that you have when you're in an operating site in difficult conditions. But
Yeah.
I think if you haven't gone digital and you're not harvesting the data that you already have, there's opportunity for growth for everybody. And I think that's the next step, is look at your operation. What data is available there? What are you collecting today? And take a good look at it and see what your options are. I think that's honestly the best first step for anybody, because we're all at different stages. Nick's been using digital plots for 10 years, someone's still using paper. Your growth pattern is going to be different, but I encourage you to look at what data is available and how you're using it. And what Patty said too is ask yourself the question, what am I trying to answer? What do I need in my operation? And then look at what data can help you get through that and walk through those next steps, because without constantly evolving, you become stagnant. So that's what I think the industry needs to do from wherever you're at.
And that's even in our space right now, Jody, as you know, we're venturing into the Krux plods as well. And but it's given us an opportunity to look at the data that we are collecting. Is that still relevant to what we're doing within our business and what we want to provide our clients and what they're asking for? So, there's always this, you're always growing, you're always transitioning and looking at what you can be doing there. So yeah, it's just endless what can come from this.
And not all data is good data too. If you don't know what question you're trying to answer or what value it's going to provide to you, it's probably not worth looking at. Because again, we're all intuitive. We all understand the operation. Where your pain points are. What kind of data can help you get through those.
So what would you all suggest for anyone listening to this at the moment? What should they do now to prepare for the future state and transformation and taking that plunge?
Well, like so many things in life, digital is there, right? So I think it needs to be looked at. Obviously, it depends on the business, the size of the business, and where they're at in their journey. But eventually, it's going to be something that's going to happen. We're going to see a lot more clients being asking for that data. There's a big hunger for it now. I think historically it's almost been like, look, we don't need to see the drilling information apart from how many meters and the assays, but now it's coming back to, well, we want to see what those performance metrics are, and better learning and understanding. I think from the client's perspective, they want more involvement from there, and to really manage that side of things as well. So I think it's inevitable. It's going to happen. The sooner that people start looking at it and what options are there, it's just preparing for the future, really.
Yeah.
If I made a compliment, also what we are seeing also is that from an investment point of view, also at different levels of a mine cycle, is how can you take the best decisions based on the information at hand. And again, for example, I mean, one of the different conferences that I've taken part at, especially when you're starting from greenfield, and eventually if you do get to have a producing mine, is how can you reduce time to mine? Obviously, if you're an investor point of view, how do you achieve that? Of course, there like Patricia was saying earlier, there's a lot of aspects that need to be considered depending on the country, but again, for us, how can we help, our valued customers reduce the time to take the right decision?
It's a good point. I know, I talked about the data and looking at your operations and what answers you need today, but actually what answers or what information do you need in the future is also a good point, because right now you might be at a greenfields point of view, but if you go to build a mine there, if you have 10 years worth of drilling data, you have a good basis to help you build a good drill program and understand what it's going to take and cost to do that. So just another good tidbit there is how does that impact you in the future, not just today?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to have your data digital so that you can see trends and ask questions and try to get insights. I think it's really important. We've got some primitive starts to it. We've got some sites implemented with the Krux log, Krux metrics. And it's been really helpful for us to really ask and answer those questions and try to look at trends and data just in general. Try to get a feel for what we're doing and what we could do better.
Yeah. Yeah, someone's just commented, I think we can learn a great deal from the oil and gas sector. Everything from how real-time data is recorded to operation management. What is not measured is not managed.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, it's been really, really cool hearing all of your perspectives. I'm so glad that we did this chat from, yeah, all these different parts of looking at it. So thank you all so much for coming today. I just, yeah, really appreciate all of you taking the time, and yeah, it was really, really cool. So thank you.